So welcome back to another episode of the Wild Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Fenning, and I'm thrilled you're here with me again today. I'm super excited for today's guest. For one, she's as sweet as can be, and she's going to talk about the practice of Yoga Nidra Meditation, which is one practice I personally cannot live without, and something I share with all of my private yoga therapy clients. Stephanie Lopez is a licensed independent social worker, Gestalt therapist, a yoga therapist, senior iRest trainer, retreat leader, and supervisor. She is also a certified iRest teacher and serves as the director of operations for the iRest Institute. Stephanie's work is informed by her longtime immersion in the non-dual teachings of yoga and an integration of the wisdom traditions of both Eastern spirituality and Western psychology. She interweaves principles of iRest and self-inquiry into her clinical psychotherapy practice. In addition, she maintains a specialized practice devoted to iRest, helping people uncover their essential well-being, deal with difficult emotions and beliefs, and develop a meditation practice. Stephanie's compassionate presence, depth of knowledge, and love of this work create a welcoming space for insightful learning. She shares her insights in retreats, workshops, classes, and trainings throughout the United States and internationally. Since first meeting and studying with Richard Miller in 2002, Stephanie has been committed to authenticity and truth. In learning to welcome life as it is, life now reveals beauty and wonder in the most ordinary of experiences. She considers it a great privilege to support the iRest Institute, its students, and community to bring these teachings out into the world. And today, Stephanie will share more about iRest, the Panchamaya model of healing used in yoga therapy, and how the iRest protocol can help you heal. And I can't wait to hear more and share this with you. And for all of you who are driving right now or taking me along on your walk or you're working out, don't worry because there will be links to the iRest website and all of the resources we discussed today at alyssafenning.com/podcast. And before I dive in, this episode is sponsored by my upcoming Wild Wisdom Retreat in Mexico this November. So if you're ready to connect with the wisdom of your heart and the natural rhythms of nature, especially the ocean and horses, and of course Yoga Nidra, join me November 7th through 12th for a yoga and meditation retreat exclusively for women on the Baja Peninsula in Mexico. And you can learn more about my co-retreat leader, Rita Avalar, in our very first episode on nourishing your body and mind. She is a gem. Go to alyssafenning.com/Mexico to learn more and sign up. And I won't make you wait any longer. Let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. So Stephanie, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited to have you here. And our listeners always find the stories of our journeys fascinating. So would you summarize your journey and what led you to discover holistic practices and lead you where you are today with iRest?
Absolutely. And thank you, Alyssa, for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here and sharing this with you and all of your listeners. I'm someone who grew up in the Midwest. I actually grew up in Ohio. And I come from a family where there has been mental illness in my family, especially anxiety and depression in my female lineage. And so I grew up with intense anxiety. And it wasn't until after college that I even realized that that's what I was dealing with. I think it was just such an ingrained part of my growing up that I didn't have the insight to understand what I was struggling with. And when I came upon graduation, I had a pretty serious bout of depression earlier on in college and had been, dealing with anxiety and just felt completely out of balance. At the time, facing what was next after college seemed like I just wasn't sure where I wanted to go next. I knew I wasn't ready for grad school, even though that was my intention. And I got there a few years later. And so I came to these holistic practices partly in a large part, to find balance and to help me to begin to feel at ease in my body again and in my mind and how I was navigating everyday life, because quite honestly, it just felt overwhelming. And in addition to that, however, I had been an avid power walker in college. And my senior year of college, I was power walking along the Hocking River. I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And there was a moment where, as I was power walking, all sense of feeling separate from the world. So the way I could describe it for your listeners is the sense of being me, as Stephanie, that has a particular personality that was walking in my body, dropped away. And I hadn't done any formal yoga or meditation or anything like that. But all I know is it felt like I was connected with everything, the river, the sky, the birds, the cars on the highway, the buildings. I just didn't feel any separation from anything. And it was the most beautiful, wondrous, awe-inspiring experience that I'd ever had. And I really did not understand what happened. It was very confusing when I came back, so to speak, and felt myself again in my body. It wasn't that I was disconnected or dissociated from my body, however, the whole time. I felt my body. I felt deeply at ease. It felt very fluid. But it's just that I wasn't just my body. I was greater than my body. And in fact, I was connected with everything. So this too was a very, as you can imagine, a very profound experience. And that also started me on a search because I needed to understand what had happened to me and what this was. So the combination of the two is really what set me at the beginning of my journey of finding some holistic, alternative practices to understand what was going on.
That's amazing, Stephanie. It sounds like you were fully connected to everything in that moment.
Absolutely. It was in no way a sense of splitting off or feeling disconnected. It was quite the opposite. It was abiding and feeling as if my orienting principle, if you will, my sense of orientation felt like it was everywhere rather than just inside my physical body. And it was glorious. It's foundational to have this understanding.
Oh, definitely. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of, for one, yoga and meditation practices, but also just connecting with nature and just how interconnected we are. And so that's a prime example of what happened to you, of just showing that interconnectedness can happen even when you're not even sure of actual practices. But it's the yoga and meditation practices that can help us get there more often. Tell me about how, you ended up getting into iRest. I'm sure there's a portion of your journey before that, but can you share that with the audience?
There was, absolutely. So there was a period where I was trying to figure all that out, that I went on a totally different path, which had to do with touring with the Grateful Dead, which was great fun. But I also, yeah, right. So I was a Deadhead for sure. I guess I'll always be in my heart. But during that time, I was actually exploring a lot of different drugs, smoking marijuana, trying acid and mushrooms and things like that. I was really trying to understand. So I went down a whole different path as well. And that just didn't serve me. And in fact, it made, as you can imagine, somebody who's anxious, while they were wonderful experiences, there was also times where it just exacerbated my anxiety for sure. And at a certain point, I gave up all drugs and alcohol. And then I really, but at the same time, ironically, when I left university, I really felt like I wanted to explore yoga. I didn't know why. And so I started taking yoga right after college, and then eventually moved to Chicago. And I was seeking a Kripalu yoga teacher. And Kripalu just happens to be a particular style of yoga, of the yoga movements or postures that we know as asana. So I was looking for an asana class. And I found this teacher. And the very first class I dropped into, he taught Yoga Nidra for half the class. Instead of doing a shorter Shavasana, he did 30 minutes of movement and 30 minutes of Yoga Nidra. And what happened is I had a very similar experience to what had happened when I was power walking. It was very profound. I felt a deep sense of wholeness and interconnectedness. I felt like I was coming home to myself, but something greater than, just the limited personality of the body. And luckily he had talked to me and helped me reground, the teacher at the time. And so my friends knew that I was very interested in Yoga Nidra because of what had happened, because this was the only other time this had happened. This was many years later that I had any insight into that type of sense of well-being and wholeness and interconnectedness. And so a friend of mine knew about Richard. Her mom had studied with Richard. He was leading a retreat. This was in 2002. And he was leading a retreat in Springfield, Illinois. And I went to that weekend retreat. And I felt that everything that I knew that was true in my heart was being spoken out loud by somebody for the first time. I mean, he's so grounded. He makes these teachings so practical and accessible. Like I said before, I'm from Ohio. I'm from the Midwest originally. So if I'm going to study something, it needs to be really practical. I need to understand how it can impact my everyday life. It needs to be grounded and real. And what was beautiful is he was able to share these deep teachings that were spiritual in nature, but we also teach them in a secular way that's accessible to anyone. And I've studied with him ever since. And now he's a dear friend, my mentor. I live out here in California and work side by side with him at the iRest Institute, supporting these teachings internationally. And just deepened my understanding ever since.
That's wonderful, Stephanie. And I agree. Everyone wants practical ways that they can implement spiritual teachings or yoga and meditation in general. And especially if you're from the Midwest or wherever you're from.
Wherever,
but being
yeah.
here in Indiana, I'm from Indiana and I was born in Ohio, actually in Cincinnati. But being here in Indiana, yeah, we want practical ways. And I always strive for bringing in, how can we make this accessible, understandable, and then practical for our daily lives? So that's why I think I love iRest as well. I know iRest uses the Panchamaya model of healing or the Kosha model. Can you tell us more about this model and its importance and how it relates to iRest and yoga therapy?
I'd be happy to, yes. So Yoga Nidra as a practice is a practice of yogic meditation, and it's thousands of years old. And Richard Miller, who's the founder, who I've been speaking of, he's also a clinical psychologist and a yogic scholar. And so when he learned Yoga Nidra, he realized that there were aspects of it at the time that had very Eastern principles to it that didn't resonate for him. And as a psychologist and a Westerner, he started to adapt the protocol and see what really resonated for him as his personal experience, such as images that were potent for him or emotions or beliefs. And I'll get into this in a minute, but he also interviewed his students to find out what worked for them. So what he did is he brought together the best of Western science and now neuroscience and the Eastern philosophies of Yoga Nidra. And so as you're sharing, it's definitely based on the Panchamaya or Kosha model. And what Kosha means, it's a Sanskrit word, and it's referring to a layer or a sheath. That's a translation for Kosha. And so the traditional model looks at 5 different aspects or layers or sheaths of our being humans, basically, being a human being. And so those 5 are part of the 10 steps of iRest. So I'll walk you through those 5, and then maybe afterwards we could talk about the 10 steps, because we have a few steps that come before these 5 koshas, and then Richard Miller added on a 6th kosha, and I'll talk to you about why he did that. But the kosha model starts with anandamaya, which means, and maya also means kosha, so or sheath or layer. So it's the sheath of the physical body. So that first kosha, we're exploring the physical body, and in traditional yoga, of course, and we can do that in an asana class through physical movement. In the iRest protocol, we don't need to physically move our body. We're actually feeling from within the body. That's called interoception, where you're just lying and feeling from within the body itself. So feeling inside the mouth, inside the ears, inside the eyes, the torso, etc. And what's beautiful is each of the koshas, they are certainly aspects of our being human. We don't deny them, but we also find that we're not limited or bound by them. So as we bring our attention to explore the felt sense of the physical body, for instance, we may find that, like I did that day on the power walk, that as we feel right into the physical body, what we find is that what's felt solid and dense, it has movement and vibration to it. Our body is an aliveness. It's a whole beautiful, exquisite feedback mechanism. And then we may find as we're feeling into the body that it starts to feel quite expansive and spacious. So we're opening up into our essential body, our more inherent body. Then the next kosha after the body or anandamaya is pranamaya, and that's where we explore breath and energy. And so it's more subtle. So we move from something that's very gross and dense, like the physical body, and each of the koshas become more and more subtle as we walk along them. And so the pranamaya, or the sheath of energy and breath, we're then, exploring the breath, basically. So we're doing various breathing techniques or breathing practices from yoga in this practice to understand the nature of the energy of breath and how it informs our body. And there are beautiful practices that we can learn how to increase energy through the breath. Let's say, like, for instance, when I was feeling more depressed, or if you've experienced chronic pain and you haven't had a good night's sleep and you're more lethargic or tired, there can be certain breathing practices that help you to increase energy and feel a greater sense of vitality to meet your day. Or there are breathing practices that actually calm you, so that turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, so to speak, which helps us rest and digest. And that's really great for somebody like myself when I was having aspects of anxiety. And so if any of your listeners can relate, when we're feeling more anxious or keyed up, or we've got a big presentation at work or something's happening, there can be breathing practices that help bring a sense of calm and balance. And so that's the pranamaya kosha. And as we walk through the Kosha model, then the next one is Monomaya, which for us in the iRest protocol, we're looking at as feelings and emotions. Feelings being the visceral felt sense, and emotions, of course, being an emotional tone. So feelings being something like soft or hard or dense or bubbly or tingly. And emotional tones also have a feeling tone to them. But a lot of times we just don't pay attention to how a feeling lands in our body. In the iRest protocol, it's all about feeling somatically in the body. And so when we meet our emotions in the meditation or in this kosha, we're exploring how different emotions arise and light up in the body as sensation. And then in the iRest protocol in particular, we teach various techniques to meet emotions as messengers so that they can reveal their underlying message and we can come back into alignment or harmony with our essential nature. The beauty of meeting our emotions, just like the body and the energy or breath, is that our attention that was bound by them, maybe we felt fused by our emotions in that moment. When we explore them through yoga, and particularly in iRest Yoga Nidra Meditation, it releases the attention that was bound so that it's freed. When we've met something fully, any bound attention is freed so that now it's released so that we have the potential to see that there's something here, a witnessing presence, or we'll just call it just our essence of being, that's ever present, that's been untouched by the emotion that's been coming and going. There's something here that's not changing. This is outside the Kosha model in the way that we teach it with iRest. But the Kosha model actually is pointing us to this truth all the time because we're realizing, there are all these layers, but there's something here that's constant, that's ever present, even as these aspects of my body and mind are coming and going. There's something consistent here that's deeply, deeply whole, interconnected, a deep sense of well-being. The fourth kosha in the Kosha model is Vignamaya, and that's traditionally translated as the wisdom body. In iRest in particular, we explore cognitions, images, our memories, and core beliefs that we have about ourselves in this kosha. Oftentimes we all have limiting beliefs that we've come to believe are true about ourselves. And so in the meditation, we explore these and come to find, hopefully, our essential nature that's been untouched. And we see even core beliefs, whether they're more on the positive end of the spectrum or more challenging or what we call, quote, negative end of the spectrum of beliefs, it's all there to reveal a message, to help us come back into harmony, like I was saying before, with just our ease of being or our true self, our essential nature. And then the fifth kosha is anandamaya. And this is the kosha of bliss or joy. And it's understood that as we come into right relationship with our body, with our breath, with emotions, our beliefs, and our memories, and we come to land in our essential nature, our true self that's ever present, there's an uncaused sense of joy or great bliss that's naturally released. I felt it that day, referring back to my power walk on the Hocking River. There was an immense sense of joy that opened up, completely uncaused. It was just coming out of that understanding of my more essential nature, even though it was quite confusing too. And so we come home to ourselves, so to speak. There's an underlying sense of joy, equanimity, deep happiness, and for some of us, it may come out as bliss that feels very ecstatic, and it's beautiful when this all unfolds. So that's the 5 Kosha model, or the Panchamaya Kosha, just a brief overview. And that's embedded in the 10 steps of iRest. But I was saying in iRest, we also add another kosha on it, another step afterwards that is called Asmita. And Asmita comes to us from the yogic literature, and it refers to a sense of the ego I, or our personality. And in the practice, what we realize is that the I thought, our sense of being a separate I in the world, it serves us well. Evolutionary wise, we've needed it to be safe in the world, and we're not denying that we each have a distinct personality. However, what we find in meditation is it's not all of who we are. The I thought itself is coming and going too. And when you're driving to work and you're driving that same drive that you've always driven, you're not constantly thinking, oh, I'm Alyssa and I'm driving, for instance. I'm Alyssa and I'm driving. The I thought drops away. Driving happens. And so what the beauty is in deeper meditation is that we might find that, oh, there's something else here. There's my true nature, my essential nature that's undeniable, that's ever present, even as the I thought is coming and going. But the I thought is so tricky. It's so ingrained in us that it tends to claim everything for itself. That's its function. It helps us divide up the world that's actually indivisible, but it divides that which is really indivisible. There's this beautiful wholeness of the world, but then we need to see it in its individual parts in order to navigate it, right? And so that's the beauty of our personality and our mind and what it does, and the ego in particular. But when it comes home to our more essential nature, we can realize, oh, it can serve us. It can help us navigate the world. But more and more now, I'm living just through this ground of being, my wholeness that's ever present, that's been untouched by trauma, untouched by the anxiety, untouched by stress in our everyday lives. Not that it doesn't happen, we still experience the stress, but there's an underlying sense of well-being and deep okayness that's also equally present. And that's just changed my life. And that's what meditation points us to. And that's what we specifically help you to understand with the iRest Yoga Nidra Meditation protocol.
And when you say it's changed your life, I would say that it's been transforming to mine as well. Just the practice of doing it. That's why I like to host you coming in at my yoga studio every year. And I'll practice and listen to things on my own, because it's something I really can't live without. It's been so helpful. And And it's something I share with clients. I recommend going to the iRest website, which we'll link to, and all the different tools there. And even there, I know there's some on some of the smartphone apps like Insight Timer and things like that, and I've recommended. So, Stephanie, you mentioned that there's a few things to prep before. That's part of the 10-step protocol for iRest, but the few things to prep before you get into the koshas. And then in general, if you'll talk a little bit about the steps, and then in general, how can iRest be helpful for our listeners? You've already kind of touched on it in your stories and things, but anything you want to share there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to give some more day-to-day examples of how I use it in my everyday life, or how your users may use it in their everyday lives, if this is something that's interesting for you, or resonates in some way. So it is a 10-step protocol. It's based on that ground of healing, and knowing that we all have this sense of wholeness, just because we're all human beings. We're not. There's a reason why we weren't called human doings. Somehow I think that's just this beauty that there's an essence of just our being. So let's start there. We all know it. Maybe when you were a child, you can remember a day where you were outside playing and you were bored, just laying on the grass, looking up at the sky. And there was this moment of feeling deeply at peace, deeply whole. Maybe you felt your body a little bit more expansive than you normally do. Just this quality of being where you're not attending to the next thing. Maybe on a Sunday afternoon where all your chores are done and you can just be at ease and have a cool drink by your side if it's a warm, sunny day. And your mind isn't grasping on the next thing. You just have this moment of being, just simply abiding and being. We all know this, it's just we haven't paused to pay attention to it. Maybe somebody hasn't pointed it out. So starting from that ground of wholeness and realizing that that's our essential nature, it's ever present, that is wonderful for anybody, because then if I felt broken, or I feel like there are parts of me that I struggle with, I'm not starting from a place of brokenness, or I've got to heal from the brokenness. I'm starting from the ground of wholeness, and I'm healing from wholeness to wholeness. So I just wanted to give that as the ground out of which the rest of the conversation can happen. But the first step of iRest is, as far as the meditation goes, is we're opening up to an intention for the practice. And when we set an intention, it's really kind of focusing our energy to keep it, you could think of it like the stones around a fire pit. And we put those stones there so that the fire doesn't spread, right? And so you can think of intention like the fire pit stones. We set our intention and we're setting our energy so that it helps to keep our focus contained during the meditation. Otherwise, it's really easy just to go out to your to-do list or something like that, you know what I mean, in your mind to become distracted. So we set an intention for our practice, and then we open up into what we call the heartfelt desire. And the heartfelt desire is looking at what's our deepest sense of purpose and meaning as we're living our life. So if we're each a unique expression of life, how is it wanting to be lived through you? And we're not just starting with, oh, I'm Stephanie and I personally want to fill in the blank. It's a deeper contemplation of what's this thread that's here throughout my life that I can't deny, that it feels like it's coming from my heart, and life is just asking me to be an expression of fill in the blank. It could be I'm a compassionate, loving human being, or I live my life based on truth, or I really devoted to a sense of community. I don't know what that is, but we each can inquire into that, because it informs us as we're living our life. And then the next step is what's called an inner resource, and it's part of what makes iRest trauma sensitive. It's extremely important. And the inner resource is a sense of ground, a sense of security or safety, deep peace and well-being that we have in ourselves. And we can use different memories or images to access it, but the inner resource is not a place or a memory or an image. The inner resource ultimately is a felt sense in our body. So this whole practice of meditation, like I was saying, it's somatic, which means we open up to a felt sense in our body so that we're opening to the wholeness of our body as a biofeedback mechanism. That's great, marvelous mystery that helps us to live life, right? And so we want to open up to a sense of groundedness. If that's too big, just a sense of okayness, or a sense of well-being, or security. How does that feel in our body? When you feel grounded, do you feel a warmth in your belly that spreads through your whole body? Do you feel it in your feet? Do you feel like your heart is opening and expanding out? Everybody feels it differently. But if it's hard to just go straight into the felt sense, that's where we can imagine a place where we felt really secure or deeply connected and grounded. And maybe that is a place in nature, like you were saying, Alyssa, that you really feel deeply connected in nature. So we can bring that into our mind's eye and use all of our senses. What does it smell like? What does it look like? What does it feel like to be there? But then we want to notice how that lights up inside our physical body as a sensation. That feeling sense of it is the inner resource. Because if I'm stressed out, if I'm having a moment of fear or anxiety, surprise, trauma, and I try to go to a memory, it's cognitive. And in those moments, our mind, when we're experiencing something overwhelming, it's flooded by hormones and chemicals, and we're not going to be able to go to a cognitive thought in our mind. It's going to be lost. But if we've practiced feeling this inner resource as a felt sense in the body, so that we've got a relaxation response that's connected to it because we felt it over and over again, little and often, then when we need it most, it's going to support us and it's going to come online, so to speak, even when we're experiencing anxiety or fear or stress. And I would say that's probably, along with the body anandamaya, or the body sensing portion of the protocol of the 10 steps, that's feeling in the body is so pivotal because it's a somatic practice. That's the most important. And the second most important is, or equally important, is the inner resource. And it's practical. I weave in my inner resource all day long. I'm feeling it all day. And because it can help us, if we're starting to feel stress, if we notice that we're having stressful thoughts or emotions, an interaction with our child or our parent or at work, if we've done this in a meditation where we're feeling that sense of deep ease and groundedness and peace, we can weave that in. Nobody knows we're doing it. We feel it right in the moment. And it softens what's happening. It gives us a new ground to meet the stressful situation. It builds a sense of resilience and flexibility. It also builds a sense of self-regulation. We can regulate our emotions with greater ease because we have this in our back pocket, So it's really powerful. It gives us a sense of control. And so those are the three aspects of traditional Yoga Nidra. That's called Sankalpa, which is our resolution, our resolve. Our heartfelt intention is what Sankalpa is translated as from Sanskrit in traditional Yoga Nidra. Richard separated that out. It's usually one step. He separated that out into these 3 steps that are quite distinct that we can then interweave in our life. Then, so those are the first 3 steps. Then body sensing, breath sensing, meeting emotions, beliefs. Then the step that I talked about, where we meet joy and happiness, joy, and great bliss. And then the step where we see through the I thought. And we're opening up just to our ground of being. This interconnected wholeness, sense of, abiding well-being that's ever present. And that ground of being can open us up into even more subtle understandings of our essential nature. And then the 10th step of iRest is coming back into everyday life, the integration of this. so that whatever our insight is in the meditation, we want to be able to have that understanding so that we're not just forgetting about it once we've done a meditation, but it's alive in us as we're living our everyday life. So as we meet emotions and we meet challenging beliefs and thoughts and memories in the meditation, it gives us the flexibility and the tools to meet these same very emotions or memories or difficult beliefs when we're in our everyday lives. And so we use the practice, I use it all day long, moment to moment. So it's more of a way of living than just a yogic meditation practice that I do for, 30 minutes in the morning or the evening or something. So
I love that, Stephanie. I appreciate you sharing all of that. I'm a huge proponent in helping people get connected to their body. And there's so much wisdom when we listen to our body and have the body tell us what, it's trying to speak to us all along. And this practice of iRest, Yoga Nidra meditation, really helps us listen to it because we're so disconnected a lot of times from the mind body aspect. And to me, this is a tool that can help reconnect us. And I love the inner resource part. That's changed for me over time. And so is the heartfelt desire. The more you practice, the more you start to really realize what is your true, that memory that can help you access that sense of felt being, that well-being. And also what is your true heart's desire? Because I know when I first began practicing iRest, it was sort of like, what? I'm not really sure. I remember the first time I was introduced to it was with Linda Oceans and Marsha Miller at Yoga on High. I was on a silent retreat with them. And so they gave examples. So that was really easy to kind of take some of those examples and just use those in the beginning. And I know when you teach, you share examples too. But now that I've practiced, it was actually last year when you were there for a weekend at Embark, love is what came up as my heartfelt desire. It just came from my heart. Like it just came from nowhere, or not nowhere, but my heart. And then my inner resource, I've found that if I think of like my dog, she brings up too much emotion for me. So my inner resource, the memory that has helped me get that felt sense of well-being, is really me having my hands on horses and grooming horses. That's what helps me relax. And so I use those examples because I'll share, go do some iRest things and the websites and on Insight Timer. I share those with people because they're very helpful. And I give them a little like, here's my examples. I just think it's the whole practice is one of the best ways. I mean, I know it's not the only way, but one of the best ways to get in touch and reconnect the body and the mind, which is key to helping to heal in various ways, whatever's going on.
Absolutely. Being able to, I love what you were sharing, just the wisdom of the body and being able to access that wisdom so that what it does is it breaks that, the neuronal connections that we get these grooves, right, with our habitual conditioned way of thinking in the world. And there are certain situations when we get angry, we tend to react a certain way. When we become afraid, we tend to react a certain way. And what it breaks is by coming into the wisdom of the body, feeling these as they light up in the body, as a somatic felt sense. Then it gives us this great deeper wisdom, but it's also breaking that habitual conditioned way so that we find a more authentic response. I don't know about you, but I feel like I live lighter. I have a greater sense of freedom, and I have a greater sense of spontaneity, like an authenticity, so that I don't have to. This is the biggest game changer, I'd say, through the years, is that living with anxiety, I felt like I had to control everything. And I realize now the inherent freedom of just being. Not only do I not have to control life, it's impossible. We know we can't control what goes on out there. But if I can have a sense of safety and security and ground in here, and I realize that just through being, I have the capacity to meet what life is bringing. And even when it's really challenging, there's a deep wisdom that's here that I'm going to know the most perfect response in the moment, that I'm doing the best I can. It's profound in its change and how it's changed my ability to meet life and how I see life. So I just want to thank you for that piece, because I wanted to elaborate on it a little bit more. And also that, look, these are 10 steps, but as you listen to these practices, and we can talk about a few resources that are available to people if they're interested to learn more, we can also take each one of these and have them be their own meditation. So if you are somebody who hasn't experienced meditating and feeling from within your body, you can do just the body sensing portion, and it helps you to learn to develop concentration, to be able to focus attention and build concentration just by taking the body sensing portion or using the breath sensing portion. So they can be done individually, and I'd highly recommend doing the inner resource one, little and often. And like you said, some of these understandings mature over time. But once we land as the felt sense of the inner resource, once we have it as a felt sense, while those access points, like you were talking about, might change, at some point we may just be able to go straight into the felt sense itself, which is really beautiful. So thank you for letting me share all of this. It's just a joy, and I hope that the listeners find something from our discussion today that will serve you, and that will bring a greater sense of ease and spontaneity into your life as well.
Well, great, Stephanie. That's everything you shared. Like, you put it so beautifully. And I really do hope all our listeners will enjoy it. I know I've enjoyed just listening to you. And some of the resources, we'll be sure to link to all the resources in the show notes. Are there any specific ones you want to kind of mention right now before we come to a close?
Sure. We have free meditations that you can just try on our website, which is iRest.org. And we also have meditations on Insight Timer. So if you look up iRest on Insight Timer, that's a meditation app, Alyssa, that you were talking about, that people often will download onto their phones. And we have free ones that are available there that you can listen to, as well as a paid course that you can do on Insight Timer. So that's pretty exciting. We have a 14-day iRest course that's available online with Ann Douglas, who's another one of our senior iRest trainers. And it walks you through the 10 steps of iRest across 14 days. And it has an introduction, and then each of them are about a 10-minute practice. And it builds to a whole practice by the end, but it also gives individual practices for each of the steps of iRest. So that might be interesting to people, and that can be found on our website. And then on top of all of those resources, of course, we have things that you can purchase on our website, various MP3 downloads of iRest. But I'm also really excited that you're hosting me again to do an iRest immersion weekend in November, at the end of November. And that's a way that if your listeners are interested and you live near Embark in Indianapolis, Indiana, that you can come explore this. I teach iRest over the weekend, a Friday evening to a Sunday, late afternoon. And we walk through these 10 steps. There's lots of practices, and the whole weekend is geared to teaching the practice of iRest in a way that you can walk away from the weekend with a personal practice of iRest, understanding how to weave this also into your everyday life. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks again for hosting me.
Looking forward to it as well. Last year was wonderful, and I'm excited to host it again. And again, thank you, Stephanie, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And I know that my listeners will value your story, learning more about iRest Yoga Nidra Meditation and the Kosha Model of Healing, all the insight that you gave today. And again, just like Stephanie mentioned, she'll be at my yoga studio in Indianapolis the weekend of November 30th through December 2nd, hosting an iRest meditation immersion weekend. You can go to embarkyoga.com mexico.com/events to learn more and sign up. And of course, I'll include a direct link to the show notes as well as everything we mentioned here. And just as a reminder, this episode is sponsored by our upcoming Wild Wisdom Retreat in Mexico this November. If you're ready to connect with the wisdom of your heart and the natural rhythms of nature, especially the ocean and horses, join me November 7th to 12th for a yoga and meditation retreat exclusively for women on the Baja Peninsula in Mexico. And Yoga Nidra Meditation is always a part of these retreats because I love it so much. Go to alissafennig.com/Mexico to learn more and sign up. And one final thing, are you subscribed to my podcast? If you're not, I encourage you to do so today so you're the first to hear when the next one is live every Thursday. Take a few seconds, hit the subscribe button on your phone now, or go to alissafennig.com/podcast and make sure you get on the email list to get notified when a new episode is available. I cannot wait to see you again, same time, same place next week. Wild blessings.